The auction hall hummed with the sharp scent of polished leather and money. Floodlights carved harsh shadows across the sand arena as thoroughbreds pranced, their coats gleaming under the gaze of men in tailored suits clutching bid paddles like weapons. The gavel's crack echoed like gunshots, each sale a transaction, each horse a commodity, until he emerged, a chestnut stallion, muscles rippling under a sheen of sweat, stepped into the light. The air thickened. Buyers shifted in their seats, eyes darting away as if the animal carried a curse. His nostrils flared, not with fear, but a quiet defiance. The auctioneer's voice boomed, met with silence. Whispers slithered through the crowd. Too damaged. Bad blood. At the back, an old man in a faded plaid shirt stood, his weathered face a map of hard years. "I'll take him," Hank growled, the words slicing through the tension. The gavel fell. The stallion's hooves thudded dully against the trailer's worn floorboards as Hank drove through the night, the rhythmic sound a metronome to his unease. Moonlight spilled over the ranch as they arrived, the horse stepping down with a grace that belied his auction house shame. Hank's calloused hands brushed the stallion's flank, routine until his fingers caught on a ridge of scar tissue. The world tilted. A memory surged. A younger man clinging to a galloping horse, a fence splintering, blood-streaking gold fur. The stallion turned, his deep brown eyes locking onto Hank's. A nicker rumbled in his throat, low, warm, familiar. Hank's breath faltered. The barn walls seemed to pulse as he traced the scar again, jagged and old, identical to the one he'd stitched himself on a stormy night, decades ago. The horse nuzzled his shoulder, a gesture from a ghost. Blaze, the name hung in the air, unanswered. Dawn found Hank on the porch, coffee cold in his grip, staring at the barn. The stallion stood silhouetted in the doorway, watching, waiting. Hank's boots crunched over gravel as he approached, halter in hand. The horse didn't flinch. Leather creaked as the saddle settled, the stallion's muscles coiling like springs. Hank swung up, and they moved as one, fluid, instinctive across the field. Wind tore at Hank's hat as the landscape blurred, the rhythm of hooves syncing with his racing heart. Beneath him, Blaze surged forward, not fleeing, but leading. Toward the oak tree at the property's edge, its branches clawing at the sky, Hank dismounted, his voice barely a whisper. "Blaze!" The stallion's ears snapped forward, his whole body tensing. A name unearthed, a truth undeniable. Hank's knees buckled. "You came back." The abandoned ranch loomed like a skeleton against the pale morning sky, its fences sagging under the weight of neglect. Hank's boots sank into the mud as he approached, Blaze trailing behind him with a wary grace. The stallion's nostrils flared at the scent of decay, rotted hay, rusted metal, the ghost of his own fear lingering in the air. Inside the barn, sunlight speared through cracks in the walls, illuminating deep gouges in the stall doors. Hank ran his fingers over the splintered wood, imagining hooves slamming against it night after night, a desperate bid for freedom. Blaze snorted sharply, his breath fogging in the chill, as if the memories were clawing back. In the corner of the barn, a rusted chain lay coiled like a serpent. Hank knelt, lifting it with a grimace. The links were worn thin in one spot, polished smooth by years of friction. A flash of memory struck him. Blaze, younger and wilder, thrashing against a tether, blood matting his coat as a shadowy figure watched from the doorway. Hank's jaw tightened. He followed the drag marks in the dirt to a hidden alcove, where a dusty ledger lay buried under straw. The pages crackled as he flipped them, entries detailing shipments of horses to unknown buyers, dates stretching back a decade. One name repeated like a curse. C. Monroe. The younger man from the auction house materialized in the doorway, his face ashen. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, eyes darting to the ledger in Hank's hands. Hank rose slowly, the weight of the chain still in his grip. "You knew," he said, voice low, "knew what they did to him." The man swallowed, guilt etching lines into his face. "Monroe's got eyes everywhere. Paid us to keep quiet, to break the ones that fought back." Blaze pawed the ground, a low rumble building in his chest as the man faltered. "Your horse, he never stopped fighting. That's why they branded him, why they tried to bury him." Rain began to fall as Hank drove back to his ranch, the ledger burning a hole in the passenger seat. Blaze stood rigid in the trailer, his coat twitching at every thunderclap. That night, Hank pored over the records by lantern light, each entry a knife to the gut. Dates, prices, codes for horses deemed unmanageable. Blaze's entry was brief, clinical. Subject 37. Resistance noted. Recommended disposal. The lantern flickered as wind howled through the cracks in the walls, and Hank's hands shook, not from fear, but rage. At dawn, Hank found Blaze standing sentinel at the edge of the pasture, staring east toward Monroe's sprawling estate. The stallion's ears swiveled at Hank's approach, his gaze unwavering. "Ain't just about you and me anymore, is it?" Hank murmured, tightening the cinch on the saddle. They rode hard, the landscape blurring into a smear of greens and browns, until Monroe's iron gates rose like teeth from the earth. A security guard stepped forward, hand resting on his holster. Hank dismounted, his voice a growl. "Tell Clayton, he's got company." Monroe emerged from the mansion, his smile slick and venomous. "Still playing cowboy, Hank?" he drawled, glancing at Blaze. "Should have known that beast would worm his way back to you." Hank stepped closer, the ledger clutched like a weapon. "You sold them. All of them. Horses, people, whatever lined your pockets." Monroe's smirk faltered. "Sentimentality's a weakness," he spat. "That horse was supposed to die. You were supposed to move on." Blaze lunged suddenly, teeth bared, forcing Monroe to stagger back. Hank's laugh was bitter. "Funny, he's got a better memory than you." The confrontation ended in a stalemate, Monroe's threats dissolving into the rumble of departing engines. But as Hank rode away, a black sedan slithered onto the road behind him, its windows tinted and silent. Blaze's pace quickened, his muscles coiled like springs. Hank didn't look back. He knew the fight had just begun. Rain lashed the windshield as Hank sped down the dirt road, the black sedan's headlights gnawing at his rearview mirror. Blaze stood braced in the trailer, his eyes wild, muscles taut as barbed wire. Hank veered onto a logging trail, tires skidding through mud, the sedan falling back but not gone, never gone. The forest swallowed them, branches scraping the truck like skeletal fingers. When the engine died, silence rushed in. Hank gripped the steering wheel, listening to Blaze's restless shifting. "We ain't hiding," he muttered, yanking a flashlight from the glove box. "We're hunting." The storm masked their footsteps as they crept toward the coordinates, scrawled in Monroe's ledger. A derelict feed mill on the edge of town. Razor wire crowned the fence, the stench of ammonia seeped through the cracks. Inside, the barn's groans echoed like a tomb. Hank's beam cut through the dark, revealing stalls crammed with horses, ribs jutting, coats dull, eyes hollow. One mare lifted her head, a jagged brand seared into her shoulder. In Blaze stiffened, a guttural sound rising in his throat. Hank's chest tightened. "They're alive," he whispered. "You weren't the only one." A door creaked. Hank spun, flashlight blazing. A teenage girl stood frozen, a bucket of water sloshing at her feet. "Please," she breathed. "Don't let them hear you." Her wrists bore faded rope burns, her voice frayed. "Monroe ships them out once they're broken." Blaze nudged past Hank, nostrils flaring at the girl's scent. She reached a trembling hand toward him. "I tried to help them," she said. "But the trucks come at dawn." Hoofbeats thundered outside. The girl paled. "They know you're here." Hank shoved the ledger into her hands. "Get this to the sheriff. Now." She hesitated, then vanished into the shadows. Blaze charged toward the commotion, Hank sprinting behind. In the yard, Monroe's men unloaded tranq guns from a trailer. Blaze reared, a primal scream tearing from his lungs, and the horses erupted, kicking stalls, thrashing, a cacophony of defiance. Hank lunged for the gate release, bullets biting the dirt at his heels. The latch gave way. Chaos erupted. Horses surged into the storm, a stampede of ghosts, reclaiming their rage. Blaze circled Hank, teeth bared, driving back the men. But as the last truck fled, a figure emerged from the rain. Monroe, a pistol glinting in his grip. "You're costing me," he snarled. Blaze stepped between them, a wall of muscle and fury. Monroe's laugh was hollow. "You think this ends with me? There's always another buyer, another barn." Sirens wailed in the distance. Monroe's smile twisted. "Next time, I'll bury you both." He melted into the storm, leaving Hank kneeling in the mud, Blaze's breath warm on his neck. The girl's voice cut through the rain as sheriff's lights pierced the dark. "They're here, all of them." But Hank barely heard. His hand found the fresh graze on Blaze's hind leg, blood mixing with rainwater. The stallion leaned into him, trembling, not from pain, from purpose. The courthouse steps were slick with rain, the sky a bruised purple. Hank stood under the awning, his hat pulled low, Blaze's reins looped loosely around his wrist. The stallion's breath fogged in the cold air, his scarred flank pressed against Hank's side like an oath. Inside, the girl, Lila, sat stiffly on a wooden bench, Monroe's ledger clutched to her chest. Her testimony had been sharp, relentless, a scalpel slicing through lies. But Monroe's lawyers were vultures, circling. No proof, they'd sneered. Just the word of a runaway and a washed-up cowboy. Blaze stamped his hoof, sensing Hank's tension. The trial had dragged for weeks, each day eroding hope. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, turning Blaze into a spectacle, the miracle horse. Hank hated it. This wasn't a miracle, it was a reckoning. That night, Hank found Lila in the barn, brushing Blaze with trembling hands. "They're going to let him walk," she whispered. Blaze nuzzled her hair, leaving a streak of mud. Hank studied the stallion's scar, the jagged line that mirrored his own. "Sometimes the law ain't the end," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's just the start." Monroe's ranch was dark when they arrived, the gates hanging open like a taunt. Hank dismounted, Blaze's ears flat against his skull. The air smelled of diesel and decay. Inside the stable, stalls stood empty, but the walls told stories, scratches, bloodstains, the ghosts of whimpers. Lila's voice crackled through Hank's radio. "Trucks heading your way. 10 minutes. Blaze led him to a locked storage shed. The door splintered under Hank's boot. Inside, filing cabinets overflowed with invoices, photos, shipping manifests. Proof, not of one horse, but hundreds. Hank's hands shook as he flipped through Polaroids. Horses branded, beaten, eyes vacant. Then a face he recognized. A younger Monroe standing beside a bloodied chestnut stallion. Blaze. The date stamped the corner. 2 weeks after the accident. Engines roared outside. Blaze reared, screaming a challenge. Hank didn't run. He stood in the doorway, the files held high as headlights pinned him. Monroe stepped from a black SUV, his smirk brittle. "You're too late," Hank said, tossing the photos at his feet. "The world already knows." Monroe's smile died. Behind him, camera drones buzzed like wasps, live streams Lila had triggered from the courthouse steps. The footage spread fast. The photos, the shed, Blaze's scar glowing under the glare. The state seized Monroe's assets the next day. His empire crumbled in headlines, but Hank didn't stay to watch. He stood at the auction hall again, sand shifting under Blaze's hooves. This time, the crowd was different. Ranchers in work boots, kids clutching carrots, survivors holding photos of horses they'd lost. Blaze walked the arena not as merchandise, but as witness. When the gavel fell, it wasn't for a sale, it was a promise. This land becomes a sanctuary. Winter came hard. Hank found Lila in Blaze's stall one morning, her cheek pressed against his neck. "They're adopting him out," she said, voice thick. "A family from Wyoming, gentle hands, wide pastures." Hank stiffened. Blaze lipped at his pocket, searching for sugar, always patient, always knowing. "He's not mine to keep," Hank said, more to himself. The goodbye was quiet. Hank pressed his forehead to Blaze's, the stallion's breath warm and steady. No halter, no trailer, just a nod to the rancher, a squeeze of a shoulder. As Blaze trotted toward the horizon, Lila slipped a photo into Hank's hand, the two of them side by side, backlit by dawn. On the back she'd scrawled, "They'll remember his name." Hank visits the sanctuary every spring. Kids pet Blaze's muzzle, tracing his scar, asking how he got it. The rancher always says that's where his courage leaked out. But Hank knows better. It's where the light got in. Fade out.